The marble staircase of the Wainwright mansion echoed with every step I took. I tried to remain calm, even though my heart was pounding as if it was in trouble. Evelyn, my fiancé's mother, had invited me for a family talk a month before the wedding. "Laurel, darling, come in." Her voice sounded honeyed, but her eyes remained as cold as the 2 ice cubes in the glass of expensive whiskey she greeted me with in the living room. I felt out of place among the antique furniture and paintings in heavy frames. "Noah was supposed to come later," Evelyn said when she called me back in the morning. But as soon as I crossed the threshold of this room, I realized it was a trap. Before my son makes the biggest mistake of his life, we need to settle something. Evelyn pulled a stack of papers out of a leather folder and placed them on the table in front of me. I stared at the document, not daring to pick it up. A marriage contract. 34 pages of small text that I'm sure Evelyn knew by heart. "It's simple, dear. You have no claim to the Wainwright property in the event of a divorce. No alimony, no compensation, no shares in the business. You're leaving with what you came in with." She sipped her whiskey, keeping her gaze on me. "And it seems you didn't come in with much." My cheeks flushed with humiliation. Yes, I worked as a school nurse. Yes, I lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. And yes, I wore mass-market clothes instead of designer clothes like Evelyn, but it wasn't because I couldn't afford more. "You're putting me in an awkward position, Mrs. Wainwright." My voice trembled. Noah and I never talked about the door opened, and Noah walked into the room. My fiancé, the man I planned to spend the rest of my life with. His face was pale, his eyes uncertain. "Oh, you're here." He leaned over to kiss my cheek, but I pulled away. "Did you know about this?" I pointed to the papers. "Mom mentioned it." He shrugged, not looking me in the eye. "And what do you think about it?" My heart sank, waiting for an answer. "You should probably sign it," he said quietly. "It's just a formality." A formality. He called a document that violated my dignity a formality. I looked at the man I loved and didn't recognize him. "Of course, you can take time to think about it," Evelyn said with fake concern. "But the contract must be signed before the wedding. Otherwise, there will be no wedding." "Mom, don't be dramatic," Noah tried to argue, but his voice sounded so weak that even he didn't seem to believe himself. "And I will not allow the first nurse who comes along to squander our fortune. The first nurse that comes along." I felt something break inside me. Was it my heart? "I'll take the documents home," I said, trying to preserve the remnants of my dignity, "and read them." I did not cry on the way home. The tears came later when I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the pages of the contract. I called the only person I could trust in this situation. "Mercer, can you come over? It's urgent." Mercer Finch, my financial advisor and one of the few people who knew the truth about my life, showed up half an hour later. "What's wrong?" He looked around at the scattered papers. "Oh, I see. Worse." I handed him the contract. "They think I'm after their money." Mercer looked through the document quickly, humming from time to time. "This contract is shamelessly one-sided. They're protecting every cent they have as if you're going to rob them." He looked at me. "Tell them the truth. Show them who the real millionaire is." 5 years ago, my Uncle Terry, a lonely and reclusive entrepreneur, died and left me all his property, $50 million, 3 companies, and real estate in 3 states. I was stunned and scared. Suddenly, all my friends started asking for loans. My college acquaintances came back to me, and men who had never noticed me before started asking me out to dinner. I hated it. I didn't want to be someone else's wallet. So, with Mercer's help, I developed a plan. I continued to live modestly, working at school, and invested the money in various projects under the guidance of trustees. No one knew that the quiet nurse Laurel Mason was actually one of the richest women in the state. I'm not gonna tell them the truth. I stood up, feeling a strange, calm decision inside me. I'm going to sign their contract. What? Mercer looked shocked. You realize that by doing so, you're giving up any claim to their property. And they, I picked up the last page of the contract, are giving up any claim to mine. I was not the naive girl Evelyn Wainwright thought I was. I was a woman who had been taught by life to value sincerity and to be careful with trust. And now, thanks to her prenup, I finally saw the true faces of the people I was about to tie my life to. I couldn't sleep the whole night after I met Evelyn. The prenup was on my nightstand like a ticking time bomb. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was the image of Noah shrugging his shoulders, as if my fate was indifferent to him. You should probably sign it. These words kept running through my head, pushing out all other thoughts. How did we get to this point? I got out of bed, went to the window, and watched the first rays of the sun paint the sky pink. This is not how my life with Noah started. It was full of sincerity, or so I thought. 2 years ago, a charity event at Briarwood Private School, where I worked as a nurse. I hadn't planned to attend the event. I usually avoided such gatherings with their ostentatious glitz and empty talk. But Principal Galloway insisted because they were raising money for a new medical office. Laurel, you could have just donated the right amount and stayed home, an inner voice whispered, but I didn't want to draw attention to my financial capabilities. It was easier to come, have a glass of champagne, make a modest contribution, and leave. That evening, I met Noah Wainwright. He represented his family's jewelry company, which had donated diamond earrings for the auction. I remember what he looked like, not too tall, with soft features and barely noticeable gray hair on his temples, despite being only 35. But it was his eyes that struck me the most. Gray, thoughtful, with a shadow of sadness. You don't like these events much? He asked, seeing me hiding in the corner by the window. He told me that he had come instead of his mother, who usually does charity work but was sick. We talked all night, about books, about art, about his work in the family business. I told him I worked as a school nurse. He did not ask why a woman with a medical degree chose such a modest job. He just nodded in understanding. Where you are really needed, he said. In the evening, Noah invited me for coffee, then to dinner, then to a classical music concert. He did not flaunt his wealth, did not take me to the most expensive restaurants, did not shower me with expensive gifts. I was attracted to him. He seemed sincere. 3 months passed before I met his mother, Evelyn Wainwright, a 60-year-old widow with impeccable posture and a steely gaze, did not hide her disappointment. A school nurse? How nice, she said at the time. I should have been alarmed, but I was too much in love to see the red flags. After all, I had experience recognizing people who were only interested in my money. Noah was not like that. He never asked about my finances, never complained about my non-prestigious job, never hinted that I could live better. I decided that I had finally found a man who valued me, not my bank account. My thoughts took me back to 5 years ago, when everything changed. I was still working at the city hospital when I received a call from my lawyer. My Uncle Terry, whom I only saw on family holidays, had died of a heart attack. The shocking news was not so much his sudden departure as his will. All my property, all my assets, all my companies go to my only niece, Laurel Ann Mason. $50 million, an amount I could not even imagine. I remembered Uncle Terry as a strange recluse who always brought me strange gifts from distant lands, but I had no idea that he had built a multi-million-dollar empire producing specialized instruments for research laboratories. The first year after receiving the inheritance was terrible. The news somehow got out, and suddenly I was the most popular girl in town. My ex-boyfriend from college, who had once dumped me for a cheerleader, now wanted to regain what we lost. Neighbors who had barely greeted me before brought home baked goods and invited me to dinners. And, of course, new friends appeared. The worst was with Reed, a man I dated for almost a year after receiving my inheritance. He proposed to me with a huge diamond ring and swore eternal love. And then I accidentally saw his message to a friend. When I marry this simpleton, half of her millions will be mine. After Reed, I decided to change my life. I sold the luxurious house I had bought in a fit of euphoria, quit my job at a prestigious private clinic, and moved to another part of the city. With Mercer's help, she set up several charitable foundations that operated anonymously and invested the rest of her money in reliable assets. She hired professional managers for her uncle's companies and hardly interfered in their work. And I got a job as a school nurse in Briarwood, a job I really enjoyed. My colleagues thought I was just a modest girl who loved children. No one suspected that the owner of a cozy one-bedroom apartment with a cat named Mr. Darcy could afford to buy their entire apartment complex. Coming back to the present moment, I realized that I knew so little about the Wainwrights' financial situation. Noah talked about the family business as something stable and eternal, but he never went into details. I Googled it. Wainwright Jewelry had been around for over 70 years, had 5 boutiques in prestigious areas of the city, and was famous for its exclusive designs. But something wasn't adding up. If their business was so successful, why was Evelyn so afraid that some simple nurse would encroach on their wealth? Why would Noah, who had always been so tactful, allow his mother to humiliate me? I picked up the phone and called my best friend. Piper, can you meet me in an hour? I need your advice. We met at a small coffee shop away from the city center. Piper Knox, a family lawyer, had known me since college. She was one of the few people who knew the truth about my finances. Wait. Piper set down her cup of green tea, her brown eyes widening. They made you sign a prenup, and Noah didn't even stand up for you? I nodded, feeling a wave of resentment roll in again. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that I'm starting to wonder if I even know this man. I showed her a copy of the contract. Piper quickly skimmed the document, her eyebrows creeping higher and higher. Laurel, this is one of the toughest contracts I've ever seen. They protect absolutely everything: houses, cars, jewelry, even the rights to future profits from their business. They're afraid I'll take all their wealth in the event of a divorce. I laughed bitterly. Ironic. Then tell them the truth. Piper grabbed my arm. Imagine the look on that arrogant Evelyn's face when she finds out her daughter-in-law can buy their business without even noticing the cost. I shook my head. If I tell them now, I'll never know if Noah really loves me or if he just wants my money. But you do love him, Piper reminded me gently. Or did I? After last night, I wasn't sure anymore. The image of Noah with his weak, "You should probably sign it," now overshadowed all the fond memories. You see, Piper, this isn't just about money anymore. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about whether Noah will ever be able to stand by me or whether he'll always be a mama's boy. So what are you going to do? Piper looked at me with concern. I want to learn more about the Wainwrights, about their business, why they're so desperate to protect their fortune from me. As a detective? Her lips curled into a half smile, like a woman who doesn't want to make the biggest mistake of her life. I took a bite of the croissant, but didn't taste it. You know, I Googled Evelyn. She took over the company after her husband, Dexter Wainwright, died 7 years ago. He was killed in a plane crash. And since then, there's been almost no mention of new collections or business expansion. Only reports of the closure of 2 boutiques in other cities. Piper paused. Do you think they're having financial problems? I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. Laurel, Piper sighed. I understand your doubts, but sometimes the easiest way is the best way. Just talk to Noah. Tell him the truth. I shook my head. If Noah really loved me, he wouldn't have let his mother treat me like that. He wouldn't have made me sign that humiliating contract. No, I wasn't going to reveal my cards now. First, I had to understand what was going on in the Wainwright family. I'll sign the contract, I said resolutely. But before Noah and I get married, I want to know what I'm getting into. And with whom? Piper nodded, but her eyes were worried. Just be careful. Sometimes when you dig too deep, you find something you don't want to see. I finished my coffee and looked out the window. It was raining outside, drops running down the glass, blurring the outlines of passers-by. My future with Noah seemed just as blurry now, but I was determined to clear the fog and see the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan of action. If Evelyn Wainwright wants to play spy games to protect her fortune, I can play that game too. But unlike her, I had resources she didn't even know she had. I took out my phone and scrolled through my contact list. I stopped at a name that I hadn't dialed in a few years. Harrison Welch? That's Laurel Mason. Yeah, from college. Listen, I need a favor. Harrison was a classmate of mine in medical school before he dropped out and went to work in banking. He was now a financial analyst at one of the biggest banks in the city. We weren't close friends, but I remembered helping him study for an anatomy exam that he almost failed. We met at a cafe not far from his office. Harrison hadn't changed much. The same thin face with freckles, the same nervous movements. Only now he was wearing an expensive suit, not worn-out jeans. Laurel, it's been a long time, he hugged me. How are you? Still saving people? In a way. I work as a school nurse, I smiled, watching his eyes flicker with surprise. But I'm not here for small talk. I need information. I told him I was going to marry Noah Wainwright, and I wanted to know more about his family's financial situation. The Wainwrights? The jewelry business. Harrison whistled. You know, I'm not supposed to divulge things like that. Harrison, remember when I spent 48 hours with you before your anatomy exam? You owe me. He sighed. Fine. But don't tell anyone it's from me. He looked around, as if to see if anyone was listening. The Wainwrights are in a tough spot. The business is floating on reputation and credit. Credit? Yes. After Dexter Wainwright's death, the company began to lose market share. Evelyn tried to expand, opened 2 new boutiques, but they didn't pay off. Then she invested significant amounts of money in a collection that didn't sell. And instead of cutting costs, she took out loans against their main store. I tried not to show my surprise. So they're on the verge of bankruptcy? Not quite. They still have assets. But if they don't find new sources of income or investment, they could lose everything they've built over generations in a few years. This explained a lot of things. Evelyn's desperate desire to protect the family's assets, her arrogant attitude towards me, a simple nurse, but something still didn't add up. Thank you, Harrison. You've been a great help. I stood up from the table. Laurel, he held my hand. Be careful. People in financial distress can do desperate things. I kept hearing his words as I drove home. What exactly was Evelyn planning? And what role did Noah play in it? Did he know about the family's financial problems? And most importantly, was our connection part of some plan? That evening, Noah invited me to dinner at their mansion. Mom wants to make up for the unpleasant impression from our last meeting, he said over the phone. I agreed, but I was tense inside like a string. The Wainwright mansion, which had previously seemed to me the epitome of luxury, now looked different. I noticed that some of the furniture was worn, the carpets were slightly worn, and the silver candelabra on the table needed polishing. These were small things that betrayed the financial difficulties of a wealthy family that could not afford to admit to problems. Laurel, dear, Evelyn greeted me with a tight smile. Today she was wearing a navy blue dress and a diamond necklace around her neck that I was sure cost at least several $100,000. A show of status? So glad you could make it. Noah kissed me on the cheek, but his kiss seemed mechanical. I noticed the shadows under his eyes. He was tired and tense. Dinner was gourmet, but I could barely taste the food. Evelyn made small talk, asking me about my work at the school, but in every question, I felt a hidden jab. School nursing is such a noble profession, she said, sipping her wine. How will you manage your finances after the wedding? Mom, Noah interjected, but his voice sounded weak. We're a family now, she turned to me. You know, Laurel, the Wainwrights have always lived a certain way. We have social obligations, charitable contributions, club memberships. It's expensive. I understand, Mrs. Wainwright. I tried to sound calm, but I've never asked Noah to pay my bills, and I don't intend to after the wedding. Of course you do, dear, but there will be joint expenses, vacations, housekeeping. She waved her hand to encompass the space around her. I don't think your nurse's salary will cover even a tenth of what living with the Wainwrights costs. I looked at Noah, expecting him to say something in my defense. I can handle my own expenses, Mrs. Wainwright, I said, putting my fork down. And with all due respect, my financial situation is my own business. Evelyn looked as if I had slapped her, but she quickly recovered and put on her fake smile again. Of course, of course. A mother is just worried about her son. You understand, don't you? The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence, interrupted from time to time by minor comments about the weather or politics. When it was time to leave, I was relieved. I'll walk you out, Noah said as we stepped out onto the porch. In the car, I couldn't take it anymore. Noah, what's going on? Your mother is openly humiliating me, and you're not saying a word to defend me. Laurel, you don't understand. Mom's just, she's been through a lot. Since my father died, that's no excuse for this behavior. I pulled the car to the side of the road. But I can't marry a man who can't take my side. He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. You're right. I should have protected you. It's just, this is a difficult time for our family. Mom is under a lot of pressure. What kind of pressure? He turned away, looking out the window. Business stuff. It's nothing serious. He was lying. Noah, if we're going to be married, there can't be any secrets between us. You have secrets, Laurel, he said suddenly. Do you think I don't notice how you change the subject when the conversation turns to your family? Or how you avoid questions about your past? I felt the blood drain from my face. Did he know something? We all have the right to privacy, I said quietly, and so does my family. We drove to my house in silence. Noah kissed me goodbye, but it was cold. Something had changed between us, and I wasn't sure if it could be fixed. The next day, I met with my lawyer to discuss the prenup again. Ms. Mason, I must emphasize that this document is extremely one-sided, said Alan Woods, an elderly man with graying hair and penetrating eyes. You are giving up any claim to the Wainwright property in the event of a divorce, regardless of the cause. I understand. But there's something that bothers me more. He turned the page. This clause here, it refers to future assets that may be acquired during the marriage. Normally, such clauses protect both parties, but this one only protects the Wainwrights' assets. What does that mean? It means that if you, say, receive a large inheritance or win the lottery during the marriage, that money can be considered community property. But if the Wainwrights receive something like that, it will be exclusively theirs. I felt my pulse quicken. You mean if the Wainwrights found out about my 50 million after the wedding, they could claim a share? Can we change that clause? Of course, but it requires the consent of both parties. I thought about Evelyn's reaction if I asked to change the terms of the contract. Give me a few more days, I said. I want to think about it. On the way back from the lawyer's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped. Evelyn, with her contract and her hints, seemed like a predator waiting for the right moment to attack. But why? What did she know or suspect about me? I decided to call Noah and ask him to meet me the next day. We needed to have a serious talk. But when I arrived at his house, I noticed that the front door was open. I heard voices coming from the living room. Evelyn and Noah were arguing. I should have left, but instead I came closer, trying to hear their conversation. Noah, you don't understand how serious this is. Evelyn's voice was full of despair. The bank won't give us any more time. We're going to lose everything. What do you want me to do, Mom? Sell my soul? I want you to take the chance that fate has thrown at us. This girl, Laurel, don't you see it? See what? She's hiding something. No one lives so modestly with the richest families in town. What are you talking about? Principal Galloway told me that Laurel is extremely well respected by the parents of the students. Do you know who goes to Briarwood? The Forbes kids, the Montgomery kids, the Granger kids, and they're all raving about sweet Nurse Mason. She has connections, Noah. Connections that could save our business. You want me to use Laurel for networking? I want you to save your family's legacy. After the wedding, she'll be a Wainwright. Her connections will be our connections. I stepped back from the door, feeling something cold and heavy settle in my stomach. This was why Evelyn had insisted on the prenuptial agreement, not to protect her fortune from me, but to gain access to my connections. But she didn't even realize that what was really valuable about me was not my connections, but my own 50 million. And to make matters worse, Noah didn't deny his mother. He didn't say that he loved me regardless of my acquaintances or money. He just didn't say anything. I quietly left the house and got into the car. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. All of my love, all of my hopes for a future with Noah, all of it was built on a lie. Not only mine, but his as well. Now I knew the truth, and I had to decide what to do with it. 2 weeks before the wedding, instead of joyful excitement, I felt only anxiety and emptiness. After overhearing the conversation between Noah and Evelyn, my world turned upside down. I no longer looked at Noah with eyes in love. Now I saw a weak man who could not stand up to his mother. A man who was probably going to marry me not out of love, but to save the family business. I started avoiding his calls, making various excuses: work, migraines, meetings with wedding organizers that didn't really exist. When we saw each other, I tried to be friendly, but I felt a gap growing between us. Noah noticed my aloofness, but he attributed it to pre-wedding stress. "Laurel, are you okay?" he asked when we met at a coffee shop in the middle of the week. "Of course," I smiled tightly. "I'm just tired." "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," he suddenly suggested, and I looked at him intently. A shadow flashed in his eyes. Fear? "No," he answered too quickly. "But I'm worried about you. You look exhausted." "Noah," I took a deep breath, preparing to ask him directly, "do you really want to marry me?" He took my hands in his, but his fingers were cold. "Of course I do. It's just, lately I feel like you've been pulling away, that maybe you're not doing it because you want to, but because you have to." "Have to? To whom?" "To my mother," I said quietly. Noah abruptly let go of my hands and leaned back. "That's nonsense. Yes, my mother can be difficult, but it's my choice, Laurel. And I love you." He said the right words, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. And that was enough to make my own doubts grow. The next day, I decided to go to a park on the outskirts of the city to be alone and think about the situation. It was a cool but sunny autumn day. Yellow leaves rustled under my feet as I walked along the alley. Finding a secluded bench by the lake, I sat down and closed my eyes, letting the sun warm my face. I opened my eyes and saw an elderly man of about 65, with gray hair and a tanned face. He was leaning on a cane, but he was standing up straight, with dignity. Of course, I moved over to make room. The man thanked me and sat down next to me. For a few minutes we watched in silence as the ducks swam across the lake. Then he spoke. You know, I used to be a very successful man. I had a business, a house, a family, and then I lost everything. I looked at him in surprise. I'm sorry, I said, not knowing what else to say. It was my decision. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. Something in his voice, in his eyes, seemed familiar. I looked at the man more closely, and suddenly a realization hit me. You're, I stuttered, not believing my eyes. You're, he smiled weakly. At least you used to be. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dexter Wainwright, Noah's father, Evelyn's husband, died 7 years ago in a plane crash. His body was never found, but everyone assumed he was dead. That's impossible, I whispered. It's quite possible, Laurel Mason. He looked at me with a slight smile. Yes, I know who you are. I've been watching you and my son for the past few months. My first instinct was to get up and run, but something held me back, curiosity, shock, or maybe the realization that if this man really was Dexter Wainwright, he could answer a lot of my questions. Why? How did I fake my death? Or why? He sighed. Both questions have the same answer. Evelyn, my wife has always been an ambitious woman. When we got married, I had already inherited the family business, but it was she who turned it into an empire. She was a marketing genius, a brilliant strategist, but over the years, her ambitions became unhealthy. Unhealthy? She started taking out risky loans, investing in dubious projects. I tried to restrain her, but Evelyn always got what she wanted. When I realized that our business was going downhill and my marriage had turned into a prison, I decided to disappear. You faked your own death? I still couldn't believe it. I bought a ticket for a plane that crashed. I wasn't on that flight, but everyone thought I was dead. My remains were never found, and Evelyn got the insurance and full control of the company. He smiled bitterly. You know what's ironic? I left her a thriving business. In 7 years, she's driven it almost to bankruptcy. And all this time you've been alive, watching from afar, not caring about your son. Dexter's face darkened. That's my biggest mistake. I thought Noah was old enough to stand up to his mother, but I underestimated her influence on him. She has always manipulated him, using his love and loyalty. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. And why now? Because I see history repeating itself. Evelyn used Noah to achieve her goals, and now she wants to use you too. I tensed. What do you mean? Evelyn knows you're not who you say you are, Laurel. She doesn't know the details, but she senses that you have access to something valuable. Connections, money, influence, and she wants to get it through Noah. How do you know? I have my sources, he smiled mysteriously. A man everyone thinks is dead can hear a lot of interesting things. Evelyn has been talking to several parents of Briarwood students. She knows you have a special influence on the wealthiest families in town, but she doesn't understand why. I mentioned my charitable contributions to the school, anonymous donations for scholarships for talented children from poor families. Of course, Principal Galloway knew who was behind these donations and treated me with special respect. and she probably mentioned it in conversations with the students' parents and Evelyn. I don't know how involved my son is in his mother's plans, Dexter answered honestly. He may love you sincerely, but he will never be able to free himself from her influence unless he finds the strength to resist her. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Everything I had believed for the past 2 years was a lie, or at least it was tainted with suspicion and manipulation. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because I see in you a strength I don't see in my own son. He put his hand on my shoulder. The strength to stand up to Evelyn and maybe save Noah from her influence. He pulled a business card out of his pocket and handed it to me. If you want to talk more, or if you need help, call me. When he left, I remained sitting on the bench, stunned. The business card in my hand felt like both a lifeline and a sentence. Dexter White, consultant. A fake name, a new identity. A man who had left his family for freedom. That evening, I called Mercer and Piper, inviting them over. Are you sure that's really Noah's father? Piper asked when I finished the story. He knew things that only a member of the Wainwright family could know, I replied. The same eyes, the same look on his face when he's thinking. It's crazy. Mercer paced my living room, tugging nervously at his tie. It's thriller material. But it explains a lot of things, I said. The Wainwrights' financial problems, Evelyn's insistence on a prenup, her interest in my affairs. What are you going to do? Piper asked. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to do just that, to run away, to forget Noah, Evelyn, the whole dirty tangle of lies and manipulation. But another part of me, no, I said firmly. I want to give Noah a chance to prove that he's capable of making the right choice. How exactly? Mercer looked skeptical. I'll sign their prenup. I smiled, seeing the surprise on my friends' faces. But with a few changes. The next morning, I called my lawyer and asked for a small but important adjustment to the prenup. Are you sure, Ms. Mason? Alan Woods asked when I explained my plan. Absolutely. The Wainwrights might not agree to these changes. Then the wedding won't happen, I shrugged. But I think they will. The changes seem minor, but they protect me from their potential claims. I also called Dexter. Meeting him had changed my outlook, and I wanted to know more about the family I was about to commit to. You made the right choice, he said when we met again in the park. Evelyn doesn't expect you to fight back. She thinks you're a simple nurse in love with her son, willing to do anything to marry him. And what about Noah? Do you think he knows about his mother's plans? Dexter sighed. My son is a complicated man. He's good, but he's weak. He's used to obeying his mother, letting her make decisions for him. Perhaps part of him realizes that she is manipulating him, but the other part is afraid to admit it. Do you think he doesn't love me? Was the question that tormented me the most. I think he does, but his love for you is constantly competing with his devotion to his mother, and I don't know which feeling will win. That night, I barely slept, thinking about my next move. Meeting Dexter changed me. I was no longer a naive girl who let others decide her fate. I was a woman with $50 million in her bank account and a determination to protect herself. A week before the wedding, I agreed to meet with Evelyn and her lawyer to sign the prenup. Noah was also present, although he looked uncertain and nervous. The office of the Bernstein and Partners law firm was impressive in its pomp. Massive wooden furniture, paintings in gold frames, carpets that seemed to absorb every sound. Evelyn sat at the table, radiating confidence. Her lawyer, Mr. Bernstein, spread the papers in front of us. Ms. Mason, have you read the documents? He asked. Yes, I nodded, and my lawyer has made a few changes that I'd like to discuss. Evelyn tensed. Changes? Not really. I smiled at her. There are a few things that need to be clarified. I pulled out a copy of the contract with the bullet points and handed it to Mr. Bernstein. In particular, I want to change the wording regarding future assets. I agree that the property the Wainwrights owned before the marriage should remain theirs alone, but I want the same to apply to my assets. Your assets? Evelyn did not hide her sarcasm. And what are those assets? My personal savings. I looked her straight in the eye. And any potential inheritances or gifts I might receive in the future. Mr. Bernstein looked at the changes. These are reasonable adjustments, he said reluctantly. They are in the spirit of mutual protection of interests. But Evelyn started to object, but the lawyer stopped her with a look. Mrs. Wainwright, these changes are actually very small. They simply ensure that the principle of non-interference with personal property applies to both parties. Evelyn pursed her lips but nodded. Good. Yes, I pointed to another clause. I want to clarify that each party's connections and business contacts remain their personal property and cannot be used by the other party without express consent. Evelyn's face distorted with anger. This is absurd, she raised her voice. We're family. If you're going to be a Wainwright, your contacts have to work for the family. Mom, Noah interjected quietly, Laurel has a right to protect her interest, just like we do. I looked at him in surprise. For the first time in all this time, he took my side. Perhaps there was still a strength in him that his father did not see. Evelyn gave her son a scorching look, but did not argue any further. All right, she sighed. We accept the changes. Let's sign the contract and be done with it. Mr. Bernstein prepared the final version of the document, and we all signed. When I wrote my name on the last page, I felt a strange relief. Congratulations, Evelyn said dryly. You are now officially protected from the Wainwright wealth. I looked at her and allowed myself a small smile. Just as you are from mine. As I left the office, I felt a new strength emerge inside me. The strength of a woman who is no longer afraid to be herself, who is ready to fight for her happiness, and who knows that sometimes the best defense is an unexpected attack. My wedding day came on a cold and clear October morning. The Imperial Hotel, the most luxurious building in the city, with marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and staff moving as silently as shadows, had been booked 6 months ago. The irony was that Evelyn had chosen it, believing it to be in keeping with the Wainwright family's status. She had no idea that I could have bought the hotel if I wanted to. I stood at the window of my suite, watching the guests arrive and pass through the main entrance. My dress, elegant but not pompous, with intricate lace and pearls, hung on the door of the dressing room. Piper, my friend and witness, was fussing with the florists, making sure everything was perfect. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked when we were finally alone. I looked at my watch. There was an hour and 20 minutes left before the ceremony. I have to end this properly, I replied. Piper hugged me. Then I'm with you. No matter what happens, I asked the wedding planner to tell Noah and Evelyn that I wanted to meet with them privately in a small conference room. Then I took out a folder with the documents I had prepared for this moment. Noah was the first to arrive. He looked stunning in his black tuxedo, with a light blue carnation in his buttonhole to match my bouquet. His face lit up when he saw me. Laurel, you're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. It's bad luck. I'm not superstitious, I replied. We need to talk, Noah, in private before we take this step. He frowned, but nodded. Is something wrong? Before I could answer, the door opened and Evelyn walked in, wearing a champagne-colored dress that I was sure cost more than she could afford. Around her neck was the same diamond necklace I'd seen at our memorable dinner. Laurel, darling, it's so unconventional to see the groom before the wedding. she said with feigned concern. But the organizer said it was urgent. Thank you for coming, Evelyn. I pointed to the chairs. Please sit down, both of you. They exchanged surprised glances, but sat down. Before we become a family, I want to be completely honest with you. I began, opening the folder. And I want you to be honest with me. What do you mean? Noah looked puzzled. I laid out the documents in front of them. Bank statements, investment reports, property documents. Each one had my name on it. What is this? She took one of the documents with trembling hands. This is my true financial situation, I answered calmly. 5 years ago, I inherited $50 million from my uncle Terry Mason. I also own 3 companies and real estate in 3 states. Evelyn looked as if she was running out of air. Noah just stared at the documents, unable to say a word. Is this some kind of a joke? Evelyn finally managed. Every single one of these documents is genuine and legal. I'm one of the richest women in this state. I sat down across from them. But after a bad experience with people who were only interested in my money, I decided to live modestly, to work at the school I love. But why didn't you tell us? Noah asked quietly. At first, because I wanted to make sure you loved me, not my money. Then, when your mother started pushing for a prenup, because she wanted to see how far you were willing to go, I got a copy of the signed prenup and put it in front of them. And you know what's interesting? According to this contract that your mother insisted on, Noah, I looked directly at Evelyn, you will not have access to a single cent of my wealth. Not during the marriage, and not afterward if we divorce. Evelyn's face flushed red with anger and humiliation. You've been lying to us all along. No, Evelyn, I just didn't tell you all the cards. I was calmer than ever before, just like you didn't tell me the true state of the Wainwrights' affairs, about your debts, how you hope to use my connections in Briarwood to save your business. Noah looked shocked. Laurel, I didn't. You've got the wrong idea. Maybe, I nodded, but you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth about your situation. And you didn't have the courage to take my side when your mother humiliated me. I turned to Evelyn, who was sitting with her fists clenched. You know what's funny, Evelyn. If you had just been honest with me, if you had treated me with respect, I would have helped you, not through manipulation, but through sincerity, because I really loved your son. I turned to Noah. We have 2 options, Noah. First, we cancel this contract right now. We start from scratch with complete honesty and trust. Or 2, the wedding doesn't happen. The choice is yours. Noah looked confused, sandwiched between 2 women demanding his loyalty. Laurel, can we talk about this later? The guests have already arrived. No, Noah. I shook my head. This is a decision that cannot be postponed. I don't want to start our life together with a lie. Evelyn stood up, her eyes burning with rage. You can't do this. This is blackmail. We signed a contract. Yes, we did, I nodded. And if we get married with that contract, you won't get a cent of my $50 million. Not for yourself, not for saving your business. At that moment, the door opened quietly. Dexter Wainwright entered the room. He looked elegant in his dark gray suit, the gray at his temples adding to his nobility. Evelyn's face turned into a mask of horror. Dexter? She stepped back as if she had seen a ghost. That's impossible. It's quite possible, Evelyn. He smiled weakly, but his eyes remained serious. Noah looked as if he was about to faint. Dad? His voice was barely audible. But you're dead. I'm sorry, son. Dexter stepped closer. I know I hurt you, but I couldn't live in that cage your mother made for me anymore. Evelyn grabbed the back of the chair to keep from falling. You've been alive all this time. Yes, Evelyn, and I've watched you destroy what we built together, how you manipulate our son. Dexter turned to Noah. I heard the whole conversation, son, and now you have to make a choice that I couldn't make in my time. Noah looked from his father to his mother, then to me. His face was pale and his hands were trembling. I I don't know what to say, he said. It's too much at once. Noah, I walked over and took his hands. I understand that you're in shock, but think about your life. Are you happy living under your mother's constant control? Or are you ready to start a new life based on honesty? Evelyn rushed to her son. Noah, don't listen to them. She's been lying to us all along. And your father, he abandoned us when we needed him the most. Dexter stepped closer. Son, I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I am asking you to make your own choice. Not the one your mother wants you to make. Not the one that Laurel or I want, but the one you want. Noah stood up and walked to the window. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched into fists. I could see him struggling with himself, trying to break free from the influence that had shaped him all his life. Finally, he turned to us. I love you, Laurel, he said quietly, but I don't know if I can be the man you deserve. My heart clenched with pain and relief. What do you mean? I asked. I'm weak. He looked me straight in the eye. I've always let my mom make decisions for me, and while I want to change, I want to be stronger. I'm not sure I can. Evelyn looked triumphant. Of course you can, son. You're just overwhelmed. We'll postpone the wedding until everything is settled. No, Mom, Noah said suddenly firmly. I wasn't finished. He turned to me. Laurel, you deserve a man who will stand by you without hesitation. A man who will stand up to the world for you. And I'm not sure I'm that man, at least not right now. He looked at his father. And I want to understand what happened to my family. Why my father chose to fake his own death rather than continue living with us. I felt tears coming to my eyes, but they were not tears of despair. Those are the most honest words I've ever heard you say, Noah, I said, and I'm grateful for them. I walked over to him and kissed him gently on the cheek, but maybe we both deserve something more than a relationship built on half-truths. Evelyn looked as if her world was crumbling before her eyes. You can't just call off the wedding. What am I going to tell the guests? What am I going to tell the guests? Dexter walked over to her. Tell the truth, Evelyn, that I'm back from the dead, and this is a family matter that needs time to resolve. He turned to me. Laurel, I can talk to the guests. Explain the situation as best I can. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. Thank you, Dexter, he said, and I gathered my papers and headed for the door. I gathered my documents and headed for the door. Evelyn, I don't hold it against you. And if you ever want to get your business back on track in an honest way, please contact me. Maybe we can find a way to work together. Noah looked at me with a mixture of pain and relief. Maybe deep down inside, he also realized that we weren't ready for a life together. Goodbye, Laurel, he said quietly. And thank you. For everything. I left the room with my head held high. Piper was waiting for me in the hallway. What's wrong? She asked, seeing the look on my face. There's no wedding, I answered. And you know what? It's the right thing to do. We went back to my suite where I changed into my regular clothes. Piper helped me pack my things, and then we quietly left through the service entrance, avoiding meeting the guests. As I was getting into the car, I felt a text message come through on my phone. It was Dexter. You made the right decision. Sometimes the bravest thing to do is to walk away. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I smiled and replied, I wish the same for you. Piper looked at me with concern. Are you okay? No regrets. I took a deep breath of the autumn air, feeling strangely light. I thought I was going to be broken, but actually, I feel free. For the first time in a long time, I'm not playing a role. I'm just being myself. We were driving along the coast. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I was thinking about the path I had taken over the past months. From a woman who was willing to sacrifice her dignity for love to a woman who realized her value and power. My 50 million didn't make me happy, but they gave me the freedom to choose, the freedom to refuse a relationship that did not match my values, the freedom to start over on my own terms. 6 months later, I received an invitation to the opening of a new charitable organization. It was founded by Dexter and Noah Wainwright to support children from disadvantaged families. In the letter that accompanied the invitation, Noah wrote that he had started therapy to overcome his complexes and dependence on his mother, that he and his father are trying to rebuild their relationship, and that he was grateful to me for the lesson I had taught him. I went to the opening. Noah looked different, calmer, more confident. We exchanged a few words without bitterness or regret. Sometimes the best thing two people can do for each other is to let go. As for Evelyn, I heard that she sold most of the Wainwright assets and moved to another city. Perhaps she was also trying to start a new life. And me? I stayed on as a school nurse, but now I openly used my resources to help children in need. I founded a scholarship fund for talented students from low-income families. I bought an old house near the lake and turned it into my cozy refuge. And most importantly, I finally felt comfortable in my own skin. A woman who knows her value, who is not afraid to be strong and independent. A woman who is ready for true love when it comes. A love built on honesty, respect, and equality. The marriage contract, which was supposed to bind me, set me free instead. And for that, I was grateful to fate, which sometimes knows better than we do what we really need.